I don't know that we actually need the microphones with a pretty close room, and I still possess that teacher voice a little bit in me. But we're going to go ahead and use it so that the video can catch the sound as well. So, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Patrick Spray. I'm the school superintendent. I want to thank everybody for coming out this evening. A lot of familiar faces. We have several community members here as well, so thank you for coming. I wanted to introduce a couple of people here from our school board. Dr. Kurt Harris is here this evening, as well as Mr. John Venter. Also on our school board is Ms. Beatrice Dunn, Butch Syke, and Gary Robards. They're planning on being in the next session. We have a second meeting scheduled for next week, Wednesday, the 18th, with the same presentation, etc., but with multiple opportunities. Also wanted to introduce a couple other folks who will be speaking this evening to you. Steve Sontag, who's our Director of Business here at Clark Pleasant. From the CSO Architects team, Rosemary Rehack, Jim Funk, and John Rigby. John, I don't think you have a speaking part this evening, but thanks for coming out tonight. I appreciate it. Really, our purpose tonight is three things. First, we want to share some information about Clark Pleasant, our current data situations in regards to where we're growing, where we have room capacity in our buildings, and what are some of our other current situations in regards to what we need to do in the future for planning for the school corporation. We want to discuss these items and have some open dialogue, and also listen to any comments, suggestions that you may have as well as we go along at the end. With that being said, we do have on your agenda some directions on how to be able to log comments, questions as you think of them. If you have a smartphone, we'd like to be able to do that as we go. And that will also be what we utilize to try to keep track of questions, comments, etc., so that we can build that FAQ and post on our website also. So we're trying to get a little more interactive with this session as we go, and we'll use that at the end to help guide some conversation and some questions. So if you're anything like me, sometimes you have that question, you either write it down or you type it in there and post it, and we'll come back to it at the end as well. Today's meeting is also being captured on video. We have several individuals from Whiteland High School here this evening helping us out, so I want to thank Mr. Clausen, one of our teachers at the high school, for his work, as well as the students that are here this evening. And we're going to they're going to edit the video with the PowerPoint and post that on our web page as well. So we're really trying to do as much as we can to get information out to the public in as many ways as possible. Along with these two meetings, it's also putting it on the web page and answering questions from there. So when you came in, there were sign-in sheets. As you exit, there will be an additional sign-up sheet out there because as we're gathering information in these two meetings, etc., we may then very well develop a subcommittee to study information. If you were interested in being a part of a larger work group, have a sign up for that as well. The agenda for this evening is pretty simple. We're going to talk about enrollment projections, capacities of our buildings, and existing conditions of the buildings. Our architects from CSO are going to walk us through that primarily, and Mr. Sontag is going to talk about the demographic study that was completed last school year. We do a demographic study every 2 years to kind of keep our finger on the pulse of student growth. As you know, Clark Pleasant was one of the fastest growing school districts in the state and quite possibly in the country several years ago. The good news is we don't see that rapid growth coming in the next decade, but we will continue to see growth. Also, we're going to talk about what are some of the primary concerns that come out of that information in those studies, what alternatives have been brought to light to date. Okay, there have been some discussions, there have been some things that have been talked about. Let's bring all those out into the audience this evening and talk about those, and then have some time for additional questions and comments at the end. So at this point, I think we're ready for Steve Sontag to talk about our demographics.
Thank you, Dr. Spray. I'm going to stand over here. Dr. Spray indicated that every 2 years we do a projection study or a demographic study. And probably since 99, 2000, we were in the neighborhood of about 2,500 to 2,600 students, and we found out really quickly that we needed to do an enrollment study every 2 years, just due to some years we were growing 400 and 500 students, and of course, as most of you know, that could fill up an elementary school. And at that point in time, we were the #1 growing school district in the state of Indiana based on a percentage growth. And I'm thinking it was 12 to 13% growth between the years of 2003, 04, and 05. And right about the time of 08, the economic downturn came and growth everywhere stopped, even at Hamilton Southeastern, which if you looked at raw numbers, they were growing maybe double our 400 and 500 students a year, but percentage-wise, we were growing faster than they were. Again, we conduct an enrollment projection study every 2 years by Dr. Susan Bredvig. The last one she completed was in the fall of 2013, and she's due to start gathering and compiling her data this summer, and then she'll have a board presentation probably in October or November of this year, later this fall. These enrollment projections are studied using a low growth scenario based on economic conditions, a base growth scenario, and a high growth scenario. If you notice, I didn't indicate a decrease or a decline in enrollment. Since the 98, mid-90s, we've done really nothing but grow. It just depends on how fast we're growing and the rate of growth. This slide basically indicates what each scenario looks like. You've got your low growth and kind of all the parameters for your low growth, your base, the base forecast. Basically, that's our most likely forecast. And then the high growth, and we were exhibiting that high growth in those years between 2003 and 2006. The low range basically looks like the housing bust years, if you will, between 2008 and 2011. Basically, you've got build out of your platted subdivisions, the ones that are currently on the book. There's probably no new developments coming on board. And that's what we exhibited, mainly due to the economic downturn. The high range, skipping way over here, it looks like that 03 to 06 years, like we just mentioned, and those were our housing boom years. Park Pleasant, most recently, has followed the last few years, has followed the base, and the base forecast has served us well over the years. That's where home building continues to rebound from the economic downturn. The lots in the active subdivisions are built out, plus there's new residential development in the short run. We're already seeing that. We're seeing that currently with our present housing subdivisions. We're seeing new developments coming on board. Just catty corner from the intermediate school here, there's an Arbor Homes subdivision that'll be coming online. I think they're currently building homes. There's one south and east of here that's going to be built out. So we're currently seeing the base type of scenarios play out. We will have, according to this study, 3,140 single-family housing units and 1,260 multifamily units that we're expecting to be built in the next 10 years. And that's where the 4,400 new housing units are coming online. The home building over those 10 years will be consistent with the 10-year period that we've seen, but without the peaks and valleys. As a result, our enrollment will grow with new home building and, of course, infrastructure improvements. lot of you have seen this slide before. Displayed are the trajectories of the low base and high forecast over the next 10 years. The base forecast is in the middle. This is our demarcation line, if you will. That was from that particular forecast, which was done in the fall of 2013, after our official enrollment of September 2013. You take a look at the 6233 and look where we have come from. Now, if we were to take another 5 to 10 years back, it would kind of follow that trend line. So I think back in '98, I think it stands out, we were at about 2,800 students district-wide. So as you can see in that 06, 07, 08 years, you've got a very steep incline, and it's kind of, you still had growth, but it wasn't as fast as we had seen it. The base forecast starts basically here at 2013-14. In fact, all of them do. You've got your low forecast here, your base, and then your high. So our range is anywhere from 6,400 students to about 8,900 students. And it is the base forecast that we have mirrored, and that's the forecast that we'll be using for this presentation. But before we get into that, let's go back and look at our demographer, our enrollment study person, and see how well she's done. Basically, the previous forecast that she's done for us she's performed very, very well over the last 3 years. If you take a look at the base forecast of 6,010 in 12-13 school year, she was only off by 10 students. We actually grew an additional 10 over her base forecast. In 13-14, we grew by an additional 20 over her base forecast. And then we were below her base forecast. Our actual fall student count was about 22 below. So really, it's about a net of positive 8 if you combine those 3 years, which in her world, that's not bad. That's a very tiny margin of error on her part. So she's done her homework very well. And in her study, she looks at things like birth rates, of course, migration in, migration out, housing developments, of course, economic patterns, not just in our communities, but throughout the Indianapolis area. Again, the base forecast to us is the most accurate forecast, and it's the one we want to use for our projections. From 08-09, we grew about 10% to that 13-14 year, and then she had predicted another 11%, and we're well on our way to reach that. So we're looking at our total student population, K-12, in 2023, 2024, of just over 7,400 students. Kind of weird to say 2023, 2024, but that's what we will be using, because we're just not following that low and that high trend line. Next, Dr. Rosemary Rehack will break down our grade levels by current and projected enrollment versus our capacity at each grade level.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks everyone for coming out tonight. CSO's part of this study is to take a look at, once you have those excellent enrollment projections, how well are those students going to fit in the buildings? And so we have to determine what we would say is capacity at each of your buildings. And then the second part of that is to take a look at the existing conditions of your building so that you have a pretty good overall assessment of where everything is. This is a summary slide of what capacity looks like K4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, 12 here in Park Pleasant, because that's your grade configuration as it exists. And I'm going to talk just briefly about how we go ahead and do that. I take some time with floor plans and then also meet with the principals to determine every available classroom space that can be used as an instructional space where a teacher can work with students. That we do that differently now than we did probably 20 or 30 years ago, because we have computer labs now. That computer lab can't be used for 25 second graders all day long. So that's a classroom in your building, but it has a different purpose. Sometimes people used to like to count the library as a classroom. Well, you want your library to be the library. You don't want it to be a third grade classroom. So we took every grade level classroom or every subject level classroom and determined what the appropriate count was in each one of the schools, and then multiplied it by what we felt was the appropriate number. Now at K4, we used the number 25. That's the standard in how people figure capacity. Now, luckily at Clark Pleasant, historically we've had fewer students in the classrooms, which is great for teaching. It's great for teaching and learning. But if you want to talk about how many kids can you put in a building, which is what capacity is, the general number we use at the elementary level is K4. At the upper levels, we generally use the number 28. So you'll see there's a little bit of difference in how those capacities are figured. So, what does that mean? It means that at K4, you've got a capacity for 3,075 students. Currently, you've got 2,509. The projected base enrollment, again, the projected base enrollment is 2,730. We're going to look at this in a graph too, so don't worry, we'll spend a little bit more time on this. 5-6, the capacity in this building is 1,008, current enrollment 995. Again, you can see here that that's going to be a little bit over, that's going to be over 100 students over capacity by 2023. Your middle school has capacity for 1,690, current enrollment 985, and the projected base enrollment 1,160. Now, I think it's important to know that when that building was built, it was built so that it could handle additional students, whether or not that would come through additional middle school students or whether or not there would be, there was also, the building was designed so that you could put another intermediate school wing on that building if you wanted. So there's a lot of capacity there that's available for people. And 912, you have to remember now you have two campuses there. You have your main campus, and then you also have what is now the freshman campus, the old junior high. So you can see you've got lots of capacity there. You've got 2,713 capacity, current enrollment 1,700, and the projected enrollment 2,300. So what does that look like? Oops. It looks like, first of all, we know where our greatest area of concern is, and then secondly, we look at the K4 capacity. This is just a way to visualize it. So you can see that even by 23, 24, if the base projection holds true, you have enough room for all of those students, which is a good thing. But if you look at 5-6, and again, this is where our biggest concern is, you can see that already in next year, 15-16, you're going to be just slightly over. You'll be right at capacity, and it will continue to be over capacity from that point on. So that's an area of concern, and I think it's one that you need to take a look at. One thing to remember in this building is this building was not designed to add very much space on. You've got a cafeteria that's only of a certain size, and you just can't continue to add on to buildings without taking care of other spaces like cafeterias, gymnasiums, libraries as well. So just something to keep in mind as we move through that. I think Jim will probably talk a little bit more about that. You can see at the middle school, 7th and 8th grade, we've got lots of capacity. Here we are at 1,160. We still have room in that building to put additional students. And at the high school, though, you're getting a little bit more crowded. You can see you still have room for a couple of hundred students there at the high school. So really, when we're looking at the buildings and capacity, you're doing fine, except for the 5-6 grade level. That's the area where there's going to be a little bit of a crunch. And so I think the question that the board has to struggle with and the administration has to struggle with is how do you respond to that? What do you do to take care of that need? And unfortunately, when you're looking at buildings, you have to start that plan early. So we may be talking about 23, 24, but you have to have a plan in place. And of course, in the intermediate school, that crunch is going to come a little bit sooner. So it's a good time to be thinking about it. The second part of what we did for this study was to take a look at existing conditions. And again, in order to do that, there were a couple of different things that we do. I'm a former educator, I'm a retired educator, so my job as CSO is to go and talk to principals and teachers and find out how this building functions as a school. Because there are some things that now in the 21st century with technology, with all the different kinds of groupings, with all the different kinds of testing, schools look a little bit different than they did in 1950. So how well are your schools functioning as schools? That's what we call educational adequacy. And the second part of that is how well are they doing as buildings? Many of you, I'm sure, live in brand new homes, and that's great. But if you had a home that was 100 years old like I did, there was a time when I had to put a new furnace in there. And there was a time when I had to go in and put some insulation there. And it's the same thing with your older buildings here. There are things that you just have to do. Sooner or later it's going to need a new roof. Sooner or later it's going to need heating and cooling. So Jim actually goes through and does all of that work. He does that with your maintenance department. We talk with the principals. We make sure that the data sounds accurate to people. As a part of that, we reviewed the data with central office. We talked about what it looks like. And I just do want to say one thing that, just to give a shout out to some people here in the district. Your buildings are very, very well taken care of. They're clean. People have a lot of care and a lot of pride in their buildings. But there are some things that are just issues that I think the board, number one, wants to be aware of, and the administration wants to be aware of, and there are big ticket items that in some cases need to be addressed. So I'm going to let Jim talk a little bit about that. He's really our expert, and he'll run through those slides for you, and I'll be available to put my 2 cents in as he goes along.
Thank you, Rosemary. We actually did a master plan for the district about 10 years ago, and so we were asked to come back and do an update 10 years later. And again, a lot of this is so they can forecast, what big issues we're going to deal with the next 5 to 10 years, so we can start budgeting for them. This building will have a mechanical system replaced, roofing systems, things like that. So it's a good practice on their part to be planning ahead. When we start to do this, we when a building is built. We look at, why would we want to renovate it? What would be the needs? Some of it gets down to, there's all kinds of different components and systems in the building. All of them have different lifespans. So we go through and we evaluate those and look and see, what was put in, what date it was, look back through all the original building documents just to get a big picture of each facility. And then it kind of helps us know what to expect and what the conditions are. But even, you see kind of the chart on the right there, even within one of those, those are kind of a guideline, just like they looked at, roofing systems says 20 years. There's different types of roofing systems, some are 15 years, some are 20, some are 30. So, we actually have to go and look and see what is installed. Another one is HVAC equipment, it says 30 years there. When we look at, your corporation, this building has a VAV system and a foot tank system that supplies hot and cold air to the classrooms. It actually lasts about 35 years. You've got probably half your buildings have heat pump systems. Those are about 25-year systems. You've got a few buildings left that have unit ventilators. Those are about 15. So it can be a wide swing, and so as you'll see as we'll grade these, so we'll take that into account. A lot of your buildings are fairly new. You've got 3 that are fairly recent. You've got some that are older. Some buildings, when they get their first renovation, after 20, 25, 30 years, you're not looking to replace everything. A lot of your doors and toilet fixtures, things like that, you don't need to replace. You're just looking at other things, some of the HVAC stuff or finishes. So we look at that, but then you have some buildings that are, already had that first renovation, and then when you get that second renovation, then there's a lot more stuff. You may be replacing all the piping above the ceiling that supplies all the hot and cold water to the heating equipment, because that's the lifespan of that equipment. So it just varies, but generally the second one is a lot more expensive, and that's where we even look at look at the condition of the building, how it's designed, how much flexibility it has. Is it worth building something new, or is it worth putting money into renovations? This is kind of a snapshot of your building. So kind of each one here, we list kind of when the original construction was in this column. and then look at a couple things. Major additions and renovations. Those are when you really went in and did a lot of stuff. You really took care of the majority of systems in the building and updated it. You had some where we came in and we may have replaced a roof or we replaced the boiler. Okay, those are kind of minor. And then there are some buildings you'll see where we just did an addition. Didn't really touch anything else, but we just add on more space because we need more academic space in the building. So then we get to looking at kind of two important things. One, year since the building was originally built. Kind of tells us a lot about the age of the building. And then the last column, probably even more important, is since that last major addition or renovation, how many years has it been? Because it's only been 10 years, you probably don't have a lot to do. If it's been 30, then it's probably overdue for some renovation. So, but just kind of start at the bottom. Clark Pleasant Middle School, Pleasant Crossing Elementary. This building, this is 11 years old. The other two are 4 and 8. You don't really have any projects scheduled for those buildings. You don't need it. Shouldn't need it until at least 20 years, unless it's replacing some carpet or something like that, something minor. Break a Day, 1993 originally built. It had an addition in 2004. 22 years, and actually, in the past few years, it's gotten a new roof, it's got a new boiler, and a new chiller plant. So it's already starting to get some of those things that are needed to keep it going. Whiteland Elementary, 1973, but in 2001 had a very substantial addition renovation project. So that building really is in good condition, 14 years since then. The Freshman Center, former middle school, built in 67. It's kind of had a mix. 97 kind of had some renovations, had some additional in 2009. Never hit the whole building. Probably half of that building is in great shape. The other half probably still needs some work, fair assessment. Sawmill Woods Elementary, 1960. It's been touched a few times, but never a lot. We're going to talk more about this one in depth later. The high school, 55, it's had a lot of additions, as you can imagine, a lot of renovations, but something fairly substantial in 2003. All except for probably the athletic end building, for that addition was around 93. So again, that building's really not in too bad shape. And then Clark Elementary, that's probably after Sawmill Woods, you'll see it's probably due for more work. Probably the original was built in 2011. It's had additions. It had fairly major renovation in 1989. That was 26 years ago. The building has a heat pump system in it. And one thing to look at that has life expectancy of 25 years. Well, you're going to be past that. So that's something you should start scheduling and planning to replace. I'm going to show you kind of a consumer reports rating scale for a lot of different parts of the building, both educational and physical requirements. You'll see the number 1 is green. That's good, very good. We kind of compare these to if you're doing a new building, what would you build? How would you insulate the walls? What kind of windows would you put in? What type of educational space would you plan for? And so that would be how we judge all the buildings against us. You'll see at the bottom 5, the red. Is above, you don't see those around them. In the middle, you see the green, white, and red squares not filled in. We flip to our first chart. This is educational adequacy. This is a piece of Rosemary went around and did. You'll see a lot of things on it. You can read that. Classrooms. How are they functional? A lot of different factors to that. You'll see things like furniture on there. Somewhere in here. What she looks at is the furniture flexible? Can it be arranged in small groups? Does it meet the needs of the students? And you also see, we'll flip to the next chart, which is kind of the physical condition of this furniture again, but when I'm looking at is it falling apart? Is it sturdy? Does it need replaced for that reason? But if you think about a lot of these buildings were built educationally, from when I was in school till now, and probably a lot of you, there's been a lot of changes. A lot of things with special ed. We now have pre-K buildings. We have all day kindergarten. We didn't have that, very many years ago. So the buildings have undergone a lot of changes educationally, but it may not be the building did that itself too. Maybe you've adapted education to the building, what's there. It would have been nicer to make changes to the building to make it fit the programs better. Other things you can do is kind of look, kind of vertically as well as across on this. You'll see your 3 best buildings are the middle school, this building, and Pleasant Crossing. No surprise, those are your 3 newest buildings. 3 worst are Break a Day, Sawmill, and Clark County School. Again, a lot is the age of when it was renovated, what spaces were put in. This building, 3 others have LTIs, the other elevators don't. So just little things like that. When we get the physical conditions, very similar, actually the ratings are exactly the same for your top 3 and your bottom 3. And again, you'll see a lot of, your newer buildings, you see a lot of green, whereas Sawmill Woods, you see a lot of red in that. It just gets back to age of systems, conditions, how far they are, how close they are to replacement, and so forth. Next, I'm going to talk about Sawmill Woods. This is a building now used for K1, located next to Break Day, kind of its companion building. Built in 1960, really been no additions to this, just some modifications on the inside. So 1950s and 60s were probably not some of the better years for construction for schools in the United States. We did things very economically, without a lot of provisions for future expansions or changes. This building is very much in line with that. If you've ever been in the building, if you walk around, you kind of see looks like a metal ceiling in the building. It's actually the roof. And the roof actually spans, like a classroom spans from the outside wall to the corridor wall to the corridor wall to this outside wall. So those corridor walls are actually bearing walls, so you really can't reconfigure those or change those without messing up the structural system of the building. It's also about 8'8" high, so you really can't hang. You can hang a ceiling below, but you can't run anything above it. Like if you wanted to put ductwork in the building, you couldn't do that because it's not enough height. The structure system also will not accept any more weight, so we can't hang piping in it. So even if we want to put a sprinkler system in for safety, we couldn't do that because the structure won't handle that. It doesn't have that capability. So therefore, you kind of see this building probably friction in, probably very similar to how it was in 1960. There's just been not a lot done with it. There's been a lot of kind of maintenance stuff and some repairs, but really without the ability to change things significantly. The building itself, you'll see pretty much all classrooms. There's a kind of gym that's a multi-purpose space as well. So cafeteria at lunchtime, and then tables are taken down and becomes a PE space after that. And for you can see restrooms here. The office area, very small right here. There's no secure entry. Media center's down here, which once where it was a public library for a while. So buildings, I think, were slated for demolition a few times. It just never happened. Always came back into use as needed for a school building. So some of the challenges there with the roof structure. One of the biggest complaints in the building is the HVAC systems. It has what are called horizontal ventilators, and they're like a long window, and they're long. Those were, invented a long time ago. They've not really progressed. When they're just heating only, they're fine. But nowadays we're all in air conditioning. So when air conditioning is introduced, they can't do humidity control very well. So you'll notice in each classroom there's a dehumidifier there. And between a noisy unit ventilator and a noisy dehumidifier, teaching is difficult. So you have to raise your voice. The kids may hear every second or third word. May not understand everything you say. And that's something we really try to avoid these days in building design. Other things to have, without the ability to, it's electric heat because you can't get pipe into those units, so it's very inefficient. So that part's very limiting along with the height and not being able to move walls around. The building was built with no insulation exterior walls. We used to do it back in the 60s. So there are things that are difficult to fix. When we get to the educational piece, there's no small room rooms. So if you've ever been in the building, you'll see children being put out hallways for small room construction. So you're kind of walking around them as you go down. Just the amount of conference rooms, LGI, the one multi-purpose space for gym, cafeteria, things that we wouldn't do now and are not able to do other buildings. So this building, as we move forward, has a lot of thought of, is it worth trying to do something with? Is it better to replace? And then even if do we still need it? So I'll turn this back to Dr. Sprague.
Anything in my handout isn't working out very well, so we'll try to wing this and see if I don't skip too much. A couple of things I wanted to address with our primary concerns as kind of a summary of the data thus far is with capacity. We really have two primary concerns. One's the intermediate school, Okay, it's a building that's reaching that capacity and it's set to exceed it, but then also the core of the building isn't really large enough to maybe add on long term. And right next door is the middle school, is somewhat underutilized as far as the amount of space that's available. And then it also has a larger core of the building. When we say core of the building, we mean like cafeteria structure, so the larger spaces and that sort of thing. Condition, number two, and the second one is primary concerns, condition and long-term viability of Sawmill Woods. The building doesn't make the school. Okay, I just want to be clear with that. It's the teachers that make the school, it's the kids that make the school, and Sawmill Woods is functioning exceptionally well as a school because of those reasons. Okay, but we've got to take a look at the long-term viability of the structure. And while, you know, you look at all those red 5s and red 4s there, you know, we took our school board on a tour of the building, and some of them hadn't been in the building for quite some time, etc. And as they walked through the building, like, this place is in really nice shape. It's clean, it's well taken care of. Well, yeah, we're not saying it's falling down. You know, nobody's saying that the building is falling down. Okay, but the reality of it is for long-term viability, you know, there's a lot of things that really would need to happen to bring that up to speed as compared to some of the other buildings, etc. I was meeting with the teachers over there because you can imagine after presenting some information to the board, they got back and got in the paper and that kind of thing in regards to, oh, Sawmill's going to close, Sawmill's going to close, and so that raised some awareness over Sawmill, right, ladies? So whenever I talked to them, I said, you know, look at these things. It's like they say your LGI is inadequate. Why is your LGI inadequate? Well, you don't have one. Your small instructional space is inadequate. Why? You don't have any. They're all classrooms. I mean, that structure of the building hasn't changed since 1960. The walls still stand in the exact same place. I think with the exception of a library wall that got knocked down at one point. And then there was one, you know, for example, it's like, well, your exterior brick and the walls are inadequate. And I'm thinking, is that structural? No, they don't have any insulation in them. Okay, so those are some of the things we're really talking about with Sawmill Woods. What we need to address as primary concerns is, all right, what's the long-term viability? How much money do we put in the structure, and what do you get out of that return on investment moving forward? So that's really kind of what the conversations have been in regards to Sawmill Woods. We know it needs a new roof sooner rather than later. We know that HVAC needs to be taken care of sooner rather than later. What's the cost on that compared to the return? And so then you get a new roof and good heating and air, but you still have issues with other things within the building. So that's really what we're talking about with Sawmill. Ongoing facility needs, this is the maintenance stuff, things that we all have in our homes. We know when our furnace is about to go out, if you're like, maybe just milk that as long as you can, okay? But also understand that we've got to start planning for those sorts of things. Technology is a big one. We've got to stay up to date on technology as well. And then also we've got to keep in mind our financial realities, okay? Any school corporation that has been growing has tax cap issues, okay? The rules on school finance changed a few years ago. So any school corporation that's growing, has had to build in the last decade, 15 years, has debt, okay? And we have issues with tax caps and being able to pay for that debt, because then we get into issues such as referendum, okay? So we have some financial realities that we really want to talk about a little bit. We want to just recognize those and understand what can we do to take advantage of our resources now without stretching ourselves too thin into the future. This is, where's the, thank you. Oh, there we go. All right, so this reflects what our corporation's debt payments, what our mortgage payments are right now. So we'll just kind of put it in our home, you know, finance a little bit. This is our mortgage payment annually, okay? So instead of looking at that as sticker shock, okay? Because our rough assets, the value of our school buildings is what, Mr. Sontag? Rough. $260 million in assets, okay, in the buildings. So if it makes you feel better to say, hey, that's $1,400 mortgage, all right? That's insurance, that's taxes, etc. So let's just call that $1,400. All right, it's $14 million. Let's not, you know, sugarcoat it. But these are the payments we have over the next 4 years, are roughly about that level. All right. Do we feel comfortable at that level? Like when we buy that new home, you upgrade to that new home in the first few years, you don't really feel comfortable, but you know you're going to get used to it, or maybe your income will go up, maybe our assessed value will go up, maybe it's a little easier to pay for those, etc. Okay, but as a school corporation, we understand that that's kind of a growing school corporation that is going to continue to grow. That's going to be somewhat of our reality moving forward. All right, in order to take care of some of the needs that we have, etc. I wish school corporations could go on the David Ramsey with the home finance thing, the whole David Ramsey diet, and be debt-free, and then save up for what we do. Well, we're not allowed to save up money to build a building. Okay? The only real way we can raise taxes is based on debt service. So you have to have debt to raise the funds. Okay? So it's not a reality when we're talking about schools and libraries and cities and that sort of thing. So that's really what our tax dollars are doing, is paying for this debt service. So as we take a look at this, in the next 4 or 5 years, we'll get a little stair step down. Okay? That's about a $2 million, $2.5 million buffer. Those are things we can borrow maybe short term to take care of some heating and air, some roofing, that kind of thing, smaller projects, technology possibly, etc. And then when we start getting out here a little farther, we start seeing a more dramatic drop off. So when we take a look at this, we say, oh, man, we're going to have a couple more years here of, you know, being pretty tight with this debt service and being able to add anything on. But then we see, okay, this is where things start to fall off a little bit. How does that match up then to our demographics, our capacities, and those sorts of things? And it really kind of tells us is, hey, we really want to try to maximize our current facilities as much as possible for a period of time before we really start talking about needing to add to that with a building project. We know we're going to have to at some point. At some point, Clark Pleasant will have to build something significant or larger, whether that's a large addition onto a building like the middle school, etc., and an elementary school, something. We just know the trajectory in our growth, and if you look around, we still have quite a bit of elbow room in our community, okay, for future growth. So this is really kind of that financial reality, if you will, and what we're dealing with as we go forward. Alternatives to date. What have we talked about? What have been kind of the behind-the-scenes conversations that people have had? It's like, okay, what is it that we think we might happen or could happen? What are the possibilities? Conversations, discussions, no decisions. Okay? No decisions have been made with this. Okay? I can't emphasize that enough. All right? We really have not, you know, nothing has been inked, etc. We really want to get as much input, as much dialogue and ideas as possible. Better, you know, when you deal with capacity, you have basically two options. All right? You can reutilize your existing square footage as best as possible. Okay, so that's either A, increasing the number of students in a classroom. Okay, so you could theoretically take that 25 number at elementary and take it up to 35. Boo. Okay, or you could, you know, another one is change. Can we change the grade level configuration in some way? All right, does that address and reutilize our existing square footage? Okay, we have a middle school that has some space, an intermediate school that doesn't have as much space. What if you took a look at, you know, K-5 for our elementaries, and this becoming a K-5, 6, 8 middle school, 9 through 12 high school? What does that look like? Again, discussions, no decisions, but what does it look like? What are the possibilities? Other option is add square footage. Okay, when you're dealing with capacity, you know, the other thing you can do is you can add square footage somewhere. All right, there's always a cost to that. You know, portable classrooms comes up in the discussions quite a bit. Portables are very expensive. Okay, because they're temporary fixes, but they're very expensive to put in. All right, it's really close to the same cost as actually building the classroom space. Okay, not exactly, but it's also, when you take a look at it as temporary, you may look at it as being somewhat more expensive. Or build an addition. You know, we talk about the middle school being able to accommodate an addition built onto it for future students in it later on. This building a little more difficult with the cafeteria size, etc., common spaces. You know, Mr. Sogstad and his staff would be like, sign us up, just put as many out here, because they love their school. They love being here. All right, they're a family together as a staff to make those things work and work well as an intermediate school. We've got to recognize that. You know, we start using words like closing schools, reconfiguring, ooh, don't even start with redistricting, right? Okay, the main issue is, okay, nobody's going to stand up and say, hey, redistrict my kids, redistrict my neighborhood somewhere, okay? Because they love their school. If you have a neighborhood or a group or a family that says, hey, take me, pick me, you've got a bigger problem than just capacity in our school corporation. We've got an issue with programming and that sort of thing within our schools as well. So these are really kind of the ways that we could deal with capacity as we move forward. Exploring this just a little bit, we asked to take a look at our capacities, demographics, etc. What if we went to K-5 structures in the school district? Okay, so what if all of our buildings became K-5? All right, the exception in this illustration is Sawmill Woods stays at K1, break at A, 3, 4, 5, or K1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever that looks like. Okay, so those are the parameters that were used. So K5, 25 students a classroom, you know, still have capacity in our current structures and facilities. 6 through 8, we start to get, as we move those students over to the high school or to the middle school, that 1690 is capacity. We start to see, hey, we're starting to near that capacity of that building, moving 3 grade levels in there about 2020. All right? Again, that may be a building that we can add on additional square footage at that period of time. High school wouldn't change because it's already in 9 through 12. All right? Another thing, let's talk about with Sawmill Woods. What are the options there? All right? Renovate the building as an elementary building or an alternative use. Okay, so we could put money into Sawmill Woods and say we're going to renovate that as an elementary, keep it as it's been, or we may renovate it and use it alternatively. Maybe it becomes a community preschool. Maybe it becomes something else. I don't know. Again, discussions, ideas, thoughts, not decisions right now. And then the other one is close Sawmill as an elementary school. We close a building. If we decide as an asset in the school corporation, what's the viability for that to put, you know, at least several $1 million into it. But if we close it, what does that do to our capacity? Because we're losing classrooms at that point. Again, K-5 structure, closed Sawmill, where is our capacity? K-4, well, this is going back, staying K-4, we are now, keeping the intermediate, this is where we would look at with closing Sawmills. Okay, so we would be tighter right away, moving up, and then start approaching that capacity around that 2020 as well. We go K-5 without Sawmill. All right, we still have room moving forward into the future of this projection. All right. Again, those are just addressing some of the things, some of the rumor mill that's been out there, some of the discussions that have happened at a board work session or in the different buildings, whether that's Sawmill. We had an opportunity to present here at CPI as well to the staff here too, but really kind of throwing out there everything out in the open. So at this point, I would like to go ahead and throw out anybody that had any questions, comments, observations from what you see, and where we are in response to the data or response to just your thoughts or ideas for the future learning what you learned this evening. I noticed our was the administration building assessed for possible instructional use. That would be the administration building in Whiteland there by the post office. That's where our admin building. It was not looked at as possible instructional use in this study. I'm not sure how it would be, but it's something we could look at in a pinch. Yes.
Maybe I'm just moving the slides to computer. Are you really moving short-term? We're talking about this building and you're talking 3 years from now. So like creating a unified structure idea and floating that more, you're fighting yourself in another couple of years before the middle school starts being passing that same grade, you know, it's the kids that are in, what is it, second, third, fourth grade that are really high enrollment. I know it's for a fact, but But as they shift through the system, that's where the squeezes are happening. Am I understanding that correctly? Is the squeeze, if you decide to go to a K-5 building here throughout the whole system,
Right.
make that huge change for some people. Eventually, it's going to be an issue once you get to 6 to 8, same sets of kids, because they'll be above capacity.
Right. Well, what we would do is if you take that, go to K-5, for example, 6 to 8 over the middle school. At some point in that 2020 time frame, we're going to have to add space potentially at the middle school.
Okay, so now I'm understanding feeling more that long term.
Right. So we would be potentially to think about it. That's the way how you address that capacity issue then at that building as it approaches there. It could be an addition at the middle school.
So can you do an addition in 2020?
Could you finance it? Is that what your question is?
Yeah, I don't think we need in place for that.
Yes. I think with planning and having that much time to do that, yes, we could take care of it. Could we finance that and get a building going tomorrow, next week, next year? No, I don't think we would need to. But with appropriate time and planning, we'd be able to do so. Yeah. I lost my slide. There it is. Okay. Which is right about, where is 2020, right? 16, 17, 18, 19, right there. Okay, so you'd have to structure that in a way so more of it kind of came over here.
So as a follow-up, sorry, as a follow-up to that question, is this building was built for 56 graders, yes or no?
This building was constructed with the mind of their medium. Yes, that's correct. It was taken from an elementary plan from Westlake. So the elementary blueprint was adjusted and the hallways were elongated. Mr. Saugstad knows this story better because he's actually in this building footprint in Westville and came here when this was built. So yeah, it was built as a 5th, 6th grade building, but it was a modified elementary floor plan.
And that's what makes you feel comfortable that it's more well.
Yeah, and I think there would have to be, I mean, these gentlemen and ladies over here would know better. Anytime you change a grade level configuration on that, you're still going to have some renovation costs potentially. Make classrooms look more like kindergarten classrooms, 1st grade classrooms, and a lot of that will have to do, I'm sure, with casework and that sort of thing in those areas.
So changing this to a K-5 building would not have to be redistricting?
Oh no, it would be a significant redistricting of the entire district. I mean, there's really, in a growing school community, and I know that's one of those words that superintendents have been sworn never to use is redistricting. You can create all kinds of different synonyms for it, but the reality of it is it's redistricting. But for this to be a large elementary school, which would be opening at probably somewhere around maybe 600, 700 kids, you're going to have to move things around. Okay, so yes, there would absolutely be some significant redistricting, but in a growing school district, you have to do that on a perpetual basis anyway. The goal is not to have to do it and affect that same group of kids multiple times. Right, 2 years later, that same kid in that neighborhood is moving again. And 2 years later, that same kid in that neighborhood is moving again. That's what we want to avoid completely. But, so yeah, it's a tightrope, but no, absolutely. There's going to be redistricting in Clark Pleasant in our future as we continue to grow.
When this building needs the type of capacity, realistically, the K-5 was the choice that made the most sense. What kind of timeline are we looking at for it?
The soonest possible, we wouldn't be able to do it next year. It'd have to be there. Any of those changes, I would believe, the year after, if we look with that intent and planning for that in mind as well. Another piece of that certainly would be transportation. Going down that road, that would change transportation quite a bit as well. Yes, sir.
A couple things that you made mention, the one off there closing sawmill, budgeting and all that, and the other piece is Clark. Okay, I mean, my daughter's one of the lucky ones we moved halfway through her school. She went were in down in Michael, she went to Sawmill, Break Day, finished at Clark, and intermediate, so on.
Yeah,
And all that aside, as I look at all these different schools, we say Sawmill, feasibility not on the plans to restructure, rebuild. But if you close that building off and not replace it, what do you do with the property?
haven't even gotten there yet.
But as I say, there's that value, but the other thing nobody talked about, Clark's in pretty bad shape.
Clark's going to need, as we saw here too, need some renovation, et cetera, as well. What's going on there. The thing with Clark, it's a little bit larger of a building. It doesn't have as many instructional limitations on that list that showed, so it didn't rise up as a more immediate need as Sawmill did at that point. You brought up an interesting topic on transitions. Certainly the kids who go to Sawmill, Break-A-Day, intermediate school, middle school, high school, it's 5 transitions. Okay, our typical is 4 in the district. And I know that sometimes that comes up as a concern with parents as well. Yes, sir.
The teachers, the 5th grade teachers, how do they feel about going back to the buildings? Are there bonuses of all 5th graders being here? And I would say the same thing about 4th, but from my experience, that 5th grade year is a very crucial educational moment year for most.
2 things I'll start out my comments with. 1 is the teachers love their school, and 2, there's no perfect grade level configuration. When you take a look at student achievement, etc., no significant studies have shown that, hey, K4, or 6, 7, 8 versus 7, 8, or 1 through 6 versus, K through 6, that is significantly impacts student learning. So with that being stated, what you want to do is pay attention to the transitions, certainly, and quality of instruction that's going on in the classroom, first and foremost. But I would say that, speaking for the 5th grade teachers, they love the school, they love who they work with, they really enjoy their principal on most days, right, Mr. Slogstead? Okay, so that's a piece of it. Would it be a transition to go back to the elementaries in which they came from several years ago? Yeah, that'd be a transition. All right, so, and I think with that step, if that were to be something that was considered and taken, we'd want to do that with that purposeful planning so that kids aren't moving, bouncing one place and back to another. Did I answer or give you some response to the question? Yes.
Sorry.
No, don't apologize. That's what we're here for.
Well, the other question that I had was, I don't know what the growth projections are for the Greenwood school system, and understanding, well, it's not all that. If there was any, I don't know where that's at, but the question that I'm posing is there any discussion, because I know that the lines for the school district all the way up to Frank Park, which is sometimes my modeling for parents that point that out, and for all of us that are all the way down. But, so I don't know.
Municipalities and school districts, their boundary lines are very much different, especially as cities and towns start to expand. There have been no discussions about combining school districts or swapping areas and that sort of thing. Now, as far as Greenwood's growth projections, they're going to stay pretty stagnant. They don't have much area for growth.
Right, that's what I was wondering, is if these are stagnant for growth, would then the population of children not decrease as the years go by?
Potentially. I haven't been privy to a demographic study in Greenwood, just conversations with the superintendent that they aren't expecting them to significantly grow and hoping to maintain where they are.
Does the money come from taxes? Does money that come from taxes can that only be used for building projects, or does ADM money generate money that can be used for capital projects?
Good question. Our ADM money, which is the money we get from the state directly, is derived by student count. That goes into what's called the general fund. Okay. Primarily, the general fund is used for salaries, benefits, supplies. Okay. We do, because of some tax caps, because of where we are now, we have to supplement for example, capital projects, maintenance items, those kinds of things out of the general fund to be able to keep things maintained, to be able to update some things, buy equipment, those sorts of things now. Our property tax dollars, that's debt service, capital projects, transportation, bus replacement. Okay, so that's kind of the difference there on those funds. So no, really the money generated per student does not build buildings, etc. Tax purposes and caps, etc. Constitutionally, homeowners pay 1% up to a maximum of 1%. Apartments, etc., 2%. Businesses up to 3%. Okay. In our area, we are pretty much right there at the cap. So as a homeowner, you're paying roughly right at 1%, etc. of your assessed values.
Where this going in right here, are there plans that we're aware of? If anything is built, gas stations will be off now, then that will that generate more money than
You're referring to the new interchange? Yeah. Any increase in assessed value would increase our tax base, etc. As long as it's not captured in some way by a municipality for a TIF district or something like that. So we would go onto our tax rolls. So as we increase our assessed value with homes, businesses, etc., that helps somewhat in our tax caps and being able to pay for things. Yes?
With that being said, is the next projection that comes out in the fall, does that also maybe project more housing that would be on that side just because the accessibility is easier?
We usually don't include something into the demographic study of housing unless we have something starting to be developed, maybe infrastructure starting to be put in, etc. Right now, nothing's platted, nothing's rezoned at this point. But since we do it every 2 years, we stay fairly current with it. Even the subdivision that's here on Emerson and Worthsville, it's an Arbor Homes. They've got about 20 starts on homes. They're all right about in the exact same phase of construction. All right, that's subdivision is plotted for 275 lots. It's going to take a while to fill that up. Okay, it's probably a 3, 4, 5 year process. I don't know what that would be. So even those 275 lots, we're not going to get all of those homes and all those families at once. Is open enrollment a consideration in our planning? Open enrollment has not impacted the demographic study because we do not accept students from outside the exception of our students. So it really hasn't been utilized within our demographic study. Now, municipalities and school districts like Greenwood are counting on open enrollment to maintain their level of enrollment. So they've opened up in the last couple of years with the hopes of not declining enrollment. Any hope of getting fiscal help from the city of Greenwood? I'm hoping. Stay tuned. Anything else? I don't want to keep people longer than need be or anything like that. Yes, sir.
Just quickly, if you do close on do you move those kids over to break a day? Can break a day home?
There would have to be redistricting. It would have to occur at a similar time to the break day is not large enough currently to bring all those kindergarten and first grade classrooms over. To add on to break day?
No, just got it and then rebuild on that block.
I'm not sure. We'd have to look. It would certainly impact to make that footprint larger, impact possibly that woods area to the north and or ball fields around it. Yes, sir.
One more that we talked about, maybe the teachers will fill in, then when you talk about everything at capacity, what do we have for flexibility for individualized instruction and smaller groups? Everything we talked about was pack and roll. Okay, I left the classroom years ago just for some of those simple things.
Yeah. When Dr. Rehack did her capacity study, It was in conjunction with the principals and understanding how many labs do you need, how many special education classrooms and that kind of thing. So it wasn't taking every possible classroom space and taking away from a computer lab in the classroom. And so those capacity numbers get tight in a building, but I don't think it's a matter of everybody stepping on each other. You may want to answer that better.
Thanks. I think there are two things in response to your question. First of all, we did make sure that we protected specialized spaces and that they were not included in the capacity counts. But I think the other part of your question is that one that gets into the flexibility of the building, and that's the educational adequacy that we talked about. It's where you have some buildings like Sawmill was that there really is no space for individualized instruction. It's classroom, classroom, classroom. It's why you'll see groups of kids out in the hallway working with the teacher. If you look at some of the spaces here, you'll see there's a variety of spaces. And if you're designing a building today, that's what you're going to do. You're going to have some large group. You're going to have some spaces where kids can do physical activity, do project kinds of work. You're going to have some small group instructional spaces. You're going to have your classrooms have access to those spaces so that a teacher could very easily say, okay, today we're going to go work with the classroom across the hall, and we're going to go down to the LGI, and we're going to do this project. Or very easily she could say the next day, we're going to go split into 5 groups, and this group is going to go here, this group is going to go here. Part of the difficulty is when you have a building that is just simply what they call an ed-crate building. It's classroom, classroom, classroom. You just don't have the possibility to do that. So there's a capacity question, and we did say specialized spaces that exist. We could not create specialized spaces that did not exist. So you're right on target, in fact, that there are some buildings that don't have that at all.
Okay. We'll wrap it up at this time. Let me get the image of this. Talk a few minutes about kind of next steps, if you will. We want to continue this dialogue next week again with another meeting. If you want to come next week, Greg, we're going to present the exact same information. All right. We will be putting on as a link on our website. We'll probably wait until after the meeting next Wednesday, and we'll post all the information. These fine gentlemen doing the videotaping in the back will be doing their edits to have that on there as well. Any questions and answers that we have to post there. What we can also do is we want to, continue. If you have questions, don't be hesitant to call or email anyone with those, or